In 1994, a private company absorbed nearly a third of a nation's cash, without being a bank or regulated entity. Millions voluntarily exchanged their savings for printed certificates that promised fixed, predictable, upward growth. The system was called MMM, created by former engineer Sergey Mavrodi, who believed money itself could be redesigned. Within 6 months, roughly 15 million people entered the structure, making it the largest financial pyramid in modern history. This was not a hedge fund, not a stock exchange, not even a functioning corporation backed by real assets or real revenue. It operated as a parallel financial system inside a collapsing economy, feeding on instability and fear. Its real product was not investment returns. It was engineered belief, carefully structured to scale across millions of participants. MMM was built as a hierarchical distribution network, where every new layer of participants reinforced the structure above it. Participants were divided into tens, hundreds, and thousands, so instructions and recruitment could move fast through the chain. Each member recruited new members, strengthening the structure from below and accelerating growth across the entire system. Growth relied on controlled scarcity and scheduled price increases that encouraged urgency and reduced hesitation among investors. Prices were updated twice a week, reinforcing the illusion of steady acceleration and predictable upward momentum. Investors watched the numbers climb and assumed rising momentum automatically meant safety, stability, and long-term legitimacy. Almost no one seriously asked where the actual revenue came from, or what real assets supported those rising prices. The first and most decisive victory of MMM was psychological, because belief scaled faster than capital ever could. Early 1990s, Russia faced inflation, delayed wages, and disappearing savings that left people financially vulnerable. Trust in banks and state institutions had already collapsed, leaving a dangerous vacuum in the financial system. MMM entered that vacuum with a simple and powerful message: guaranteed growth without risk or hidden complexity. Returns were paid from new deposits, so fresh participants funded the earlier investors and kept the cycle alive. As long as recruitment expanded, payouts appeared real, and confidence inside the system kept steadily growing. This was the classic Ponzi mechanism, expanded to a national scale and powered only by a steady flow of new money. Advertising amplified participation, using simple repetition and familiar characters to normalize rapid financial gains. Campaigns framed investors as partners in national progress, not reckless speculators chasing unrealistic returns. Certificates resembled official securities, complete with serial numbers and formal design elements that reinforced legitimacy. Visual details mimicked state authority, creating trust through familiar symbols rather than real financial transparency. Daily turnover reached levels that alarmed regulators and signaled that the pyramid had grown far beyond private scale. Estimates suggested up to 30% of circulating cash was now moving directly through the MMM system nationwide. At that scale, MMM was effectively competing with the national financial system, forcing officials to respond under growing pressure. Intervention became inevitable, because shutting down physical offices would not dismantle the deeper structure of collective belief. Closing the offices was easy, but dismantling the illusion of guaranteed growth across the country proved far more difficult. The core engine was brutally simple. Payouts were made only from new participants entering the system at a constantly increasing pace. There were no real businesses behind the system, no assets producing income to justify the steady returns people were promised. Despite clear warning signs, many investors defended the system and dismissed criticism from regulators and the press. Psychologists call this escalation of commitment, where mounting losses make people double down instead of withdrawing. As prices multiplied more than 100 times, exiting the system became emotionally harder for participants. Selling meant admitting failure, and that admission threatened the identity investors had built inside the system. To keep the system alive, recruitment pressure intensified across every level of the internal hierarchy structure. The hierarchy gradually evolved into a financial army, disciplined by incentives and driven by constant expansion. Every tier depended on the tiers below it, creating a fragile and increasingly unstable chain of financial obligation. Belief gradually replaced analysis, and emotional loyalty began overriding rational financial judgment across the entire network. When authorities announced formal investigations, many participants reacted with protests and public demonstrations instead of caution. Government action was reframed as an attack on ordinary citizens seeking stability and long-term financial recovery. Narrative control became as critical as cash flow, shaping how participants interpreted every warning sign and official statement. At peak momentum, prices had increased 127 times their original market value within months. Rapid expansion masked structural weakness, and the entire system depended on constant new money to survive. In 1994, no direct law clearly prohibited large pyramid schemes operating across the Russian financial system. Prosecutors instead pursued tax violations, lacking a direct legal charge against the pyramid scheme at that time. In August, police raided the founder's Moscow apartment during a highly publicized criminal investigation into MMM. Television channels broadcast the arrest nationwide, turning the criminal investigation into a major public spectacle. 2 days earlier, prices collapsed from peak levels to near their original market value within just a few hours. Offices were overwhelmed by investors seeking refunds and urgently demanding access to their remaining funds. Liquidity vanished instantly, leaving the system unable to process further withdrawals or meet mounting investor demands. Rumors spread about trucks carrying cash away overnight from company offices under unclear and controversial circumstances. Whether true or not, the legend reinforced the myth of hidden billions still somewhere inside the collapsing system. From jail, Mavrodi ran for parliament and unexpectedly won a seat in the national legislature, despite the ongoing investigation. Parliamentary immunity temporarily delayed further prosecution against him by shielding him from immediate legal action. The public spectacle blurred the line between finance and politics, creating confusion about who was truly responsible. Even after the collapse, loyal supporters continued demanding a revival of the system and a return to rapid growth. Belief outlived capital, even after the available money inside the collapsing system had almost completely disappeared. But exponential systems eventually collide with hard mathematical limits, regardless of how quickly they expand in scale. Courts later sentenced Mavrodi on fraud charges, formally recognizing the large-scale financial deception that had taken place. By then, the broader economic damage had become largely irreversible for millions of affected households and investors. Loss estimates range from hundreds of millions to several billions of dollars across the national financial system. Most investors ultimately recovered nothing, receiving no meaningful compensation for their lost savings or retirement funds. The collapse fractured trust within families and local communities, damaging relationships that had formed around shared investment. Years later, similar financial schemes resurfaced online, adapting the same structural model to global digital platforms. Mavrodi launched updated versions of the scheme, specifically targeting new global audiences across developing financial markets. Each version reused the identical mathematical impossibility, promising returns that required continuous exponential growth. Exponential promises require infinite inflow, a structural condition no real economy can sustainably support over time. Finite economies cannot sustain infinite growth because real resources and available capital remain structurally limited. The pattern echoes cases like Bernard Madoff, where investor trust was systematically exploited for unsustainable returns. It resembles collapses such as FTX, where rapid expansion masked severe structural weaknesses within the organization. Different eras, Identical structure. The underlying financial mechanics remain fundamentally unchanged across time. When certainty is promised without underlying value, systemic risk begins concentrating silently beneath the surface. And eventually, the pyramid reveals itself, exposing the structural and mathematical imbalance embedded within the system. The first 100 viewers who comment on this video and send us proof of their comment via Telegram will receive one original MMM note that has survived to this day. The Telegram contact link is in the description below the video.